Welcome back, viewers. You are still tuned into Prime Live, and as usual, as expected, and as we are always excited, we are delighted to once again welcome Ronald Abvajee, who will be addressing with us this evening the common myths and misconceptions when it comes to HIV. And despite having significant progress in terms of managing and treating HIV over the years, there definitely remains a significant amount of misinformation as well as stigma surrounding the virus. Now, with Ronald's expertise, we'll be able to, as usual, debunk some myths as well as shed light on some of the facts to help foster a better understanding. Assalamu alaikum, Ronald. Thank you for joining us on Prime Live.
Wa alaikum salam, and it's always good to be with you.
I think a great place for us to start this conversation is to talk about what HIV actually is. How do we define it? What are some of the signs and symptoms, and what are the effects that it can have on the body?
Well, when we look at HIV, many people use acronyms interchangeably. So some people used to say it's HIV, then they say it's AIDS, and then some people say it's HIV/AIDS when you read it written. And what it is essentially, if you think about an analogy, HIV is a virus, and the virus infiltrates your castle. Let's say it's a soldier that infiltrates a castle. It doesn't mean the castle is going to collapse. What it does mean is that there's an insurgent in your castle or your home, and your home is your body. What that does is that as that virus then gets activated within the body, it impacts your immune system. So it impacts what we measure called the CD4 cells, which help fight infections and certain diseases. And when the virus and your CD4 level goes below 200, and the virus of that soldier in your castle literally, increases in its presence and, starts getting more onto their side, that's when you get AIDS. And AIDS is the disease that the virus causes.
Thank you for differentiating that. I think there are a lot of people in South Africa, despite all the adverts we used to see on TV and despite all the information we received during our LO classes, I think there are still a lot of people out there who don't know the differences between HIV and AIDS, or like you said, sometimes think they're one in the same thing. So thank you for differentiating that. What I want to ask you is, as you know, we are approaching this conversation, it's important for us to be mindful and be aware, particularly when it comes to the people that are infected with HIV or AIDS in South Africa. What do you feel are some of the biggest challenges that do face people who are living with the disease or the virus?
Well, firstly, I'm laughing to myself because you said LO. When I was in school, we didn't do LO. So for those that don't understand, it's life orientation. So in school, they learn about it, if you're in my generation. But some of the things that we face with are still the old school thinkings and the myths around it. So things like stigma, things like other burdens of it, and the viewpoint that people have that, ooh, something's wrong with you. You weren't safe in what you were doing, and people think it's a death sentence. Do you know that the science has evolved so much that you can now live a healthy, normal life and even conceive children if you're HIV positive? That is how science, medication, and technology has advanced, where they're now looking at HIV and AIDS as being something that is no longer a death sentence for so many people out there.
I mean, it's crazy to think, because if you think about the hysteria, I'm talking about the 70s and the 80s hysteria when it comes to HIV and AIDS, and how there was so many, hate comments. There was so much of misinformation circulating in the media because it was this new thing that people didn't understand. I particularly also remember when Princess Diana went and visited a particular hospital and shook hands with a patient who was HIV positive. And it drove the world crazy because it was kind of like very much that stigma where you shouldn't even touch someone who has HIV. And I'm glad we've grown a lot since then in terms of our understanding of the fact that someone can live a practically normal life, and you shouldn't be holding any kind of discrimination or stigma against them because they have this virus or this disease. And I'm glad we've grown and we've moved to that point in time. But there was definitely a point in time where we definitely treated people differently.
Have we grown? I mean, stigma still with us. Remember COVID when it just started? If you knew someone that had COVID walking down the street, people moved across to the other side of the road. So the essence of the stigma hasn't left us. We've normalized it because the messages has been around for so long. And the other concerning factor for me is that yes, you can live a normal life. And yes, I can shake your hands. But how is HIV spread? It's spread through sexual fluid or semen if you're having unprotected sex, but also through blood. So if someone has got a cut on their hands, I'll give you a fist bump, I'm not going to shake your hand. However, the more that you understand, the more that you can break down misconceptions, misinformation, and stigma. So I love what you've said, because again, it's that not everyone is there yet, but for those few that are, amplify the feeling of what breaking the stigma does, rather than just the information only.
I think that's very important what you've mentioned, and I think I can completely relate to what you're talking about during COVID. We created a completely different stigma, and that's unfortunately the vicious cycle of the way the world works. Is when we don't understand something and when we don't know enough information about something, we start to discriminate, we start to create a stigma, and we start to distance ourselves from it instead of coming closer and understanding and opening our perspective. But I do know that you also had a conversation with Dr. Khairunisha Mohammed about these myths. Let's take a look.
Doctor, what are one or two of the myths that are in your mind in pink neon billboard lights that you want to debunk right now?
I would like to let everyone know U equals you. And what U equals you stands for is undetectable equals untransmittable. And I'm sure people who have HIV would hear about this and know about it, but they need to know it and feel it. To say, if you undetectable, you as good as anyone who's HIV negative. Go out and lead your best life. You don't need a condom. You don't need PrEP. You don't have to worry about your kids. You as good as new. You have a new lease on life, not just for yourself, for your family and your communities. So that U equals you is so important, but also HIV equals ARVs. End of story. There's nothing to think about. You know, in the old days, you needed a buddy and you needed to be in the right space. You don't need all that psychotherapy. That's all rubbish. If you test positive, just get onto the ARVs. And our ARVs in this day and age are potent, no side effects, no toxicity. So get with the program.
Powerfully said. I love how she finished that. Just get with the program. We've moved on. We are at a place in medicine where, you know, we've progressed and people can live a normal life. So get with the program. Stop living in the 70s where it was this illness we didn't understand and we didn't know how to conceptualize. So I love that. And in terms of awareness, that's the fine line at where you can draw it. But Ronald, what can we do better to create a more cohesive society, a society that supports, a society that is tolerable of people who are living with HIV and AIDS, a society that is accepting, and a society that is respectful?
It's, for me, I believe that it shifts from not just neck up to give you the information so you can make an informed choice. It shifts to neck down. What would that person feel? What would I feel if I was in that situation? And then that equates to the last thing. Look at it as the whole person. That whole person that has a family, friends, social, work, colleagues. How do you hold a space for them? We live in a country where Ubuntu is our essence. I am because we are. But what if we are because I am? And that's how we could begin to break down the stigma and build in inclusivity.
Now, I know we used to see back in the day a lot of adverts on TV about how important it is to know your status and get tested. What would your message be to our viewers at home? I know they can be, particularly amongst our Indian Muslim community, there's a lot of stigma that does exist with people getting regularly tested for HIV and understanding the risks that we are all under, and the fact that it can be transmitted in more than one way. So can you talk to us about the importance, in closing, of knowing your status and getting those regular checks?
I'm HIV negative. Why? Because I went for my blood test 2 weeks ago. I have my results. I showed you my results. And I'm proud of that. And I took charge of my health. With HIV or any other condition of yours, you cannot manage if you don't know. ARVs, like Dr. Mohammed said, they can help you live a normal life. But how would you know you need to take it if you don't know your status? So I don't care what behavior you've done. I don't care what that is. There's no judgment. Let us keep you as healthy as possible so that you can enjoy life going forward.
Thank you, Ronald. That was very powerfully said. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you for being open, for being honest, and for giving us as much possible information when it comes to HIV and AIDS. Talking to us about the importance of destigmatizing our own mindsets when it comes to the conversation of HIV and regularly getting tested as well. Thank you for joining us.
Afwan.
Viewers at home, that was our resident wellness expert, Ronald Abvajee. Join us on the conversation when it comes to HIV and AIDS, the much needed sense of awareness that still exists in our society, the stigmas, the discrimination that does exist in and amongst our communities. And remember, as we always talk about on the segment, the importance of understanding your status, whether it's HIV, whether it's AIDS, whether it's any other ailment or illnesses. Like Ronald said, you can't fix it, you can't treat it unless you know what's going on. So make sure you are getting those regular health checkups and make sure that you are being mindful and taking control and charge of those own stigmas and biases that you hold yourself. On that note, viewers at home, it is time for us to head over to an ad break and we'll come right back.